Today we'll be going over updating a pathway. We will be using the same pathway we created in the last video on adding pathways. To begin, we would open up pathways. As a reminder, you must have admin access in order to access pathways. So why would a user need to update a pathway? Well, maybe something changed in the pathway, or maybe it just needs to be updated with the correct information. So at our purposes, let's go ahead and find that pathway we just created in our last video, which it started with MS, and there it is, MS Elementary Science. So we're going to go ahead and click on this. First thing we want to do is go to the Pathway tab. Top right corner is the three dots. By clicking on it, shows me that I have Edit Pathway Information, or Info, Clone Pathway Version, Delete Pathway Version, or Apply Default Term Groups, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If we click on Edit Pathway Information, this allows us to update the pathway name, add the program if it's missing. In this case, it is missing. So I need to go ahead and type out the program name. We can see the term that it's starting and the description if needed. In our cases, we're just going to click the Save button. The next thing I want to go over is under the three dots again, and we have Clone Pathway Version. Let's talk about this. Cloning pathway version would be used when a new version of the same program needs to be cloned. And if you do this, the pathway needs to be exactly the same word for word, character for character, but different term. A less likely scenario for using cloning is if you have a similar pathway, but different program. For example, we have cybersecurity and information database security. And in this instance, we would create the cybersecurity pathway, clone it, and create the information database security, and then maybe change a few things in the pathway because they're very similar except for one or two rules. If you do this, you will need to update the student association credentials so that the correct students are pulled into the pathway. The delete pathway version would only be used if you created a pathway that was created by accident, or you created it and there's no longer any students part of that pathway, as most have graduated or have moved to a new pathway. From the list of the pathway rules, if you need to add a rule, and as you can see, we have the list. If you need to add a rule, you can definitely click on the add rule here. You can definitely come to the pencil here and add a rule here if need be. If, let's say, in your pathway, you have something that needs to be moved, we have the edit sequence, which allows you to find the course that needs to be moved. And in this case, we need to move this number 19, the sociology. We need to move it up. So I'm just going to click and hold, and I'm just going to drag it as it's moving out of the way for me. I can let go, and I'm good. Once done, we want to scroll up to the top and click Save Sequence. It's that easy. Any change to a pathway rule does require our nightly ingest to take an effect. Let's talk about add term group versus apply default term groups. Term groups is a way of grouping your pathway rules by terms. If your terms are pretty standard, we recommend utilizing the apply default term groups in the three dots button. If your terms are abnormal, for example, you have the pathway that is spread across smaller terms like fall 1 and 2, the winter semester, spring 1 and 2, and summer, I would use the add term group, as it allows you to customize your term groups how you want it. For our purposes today and this pathway, I will be using the apply default term groups. So I'm going to come over to my 3 dots, click apply default term groups, reset pathway to default term groupings, reset. Once it's done, as you can see, each term has been separated by each term based on, and you can see this, based on a 15 credit hour recommended for each student. Now, once the pathways are organized into each one, you can actually do things with it. For example, if I go to this year 1, term 1, I can come over here and I can do and add a rule if I need to in this grouping. I can also edit the group. So in this case, I want to say I'm going to do this because year 1 fall, and it's going to be term type of fall. I can hit the green check mark, and now I can go through and rename, and I can go to this one, edit a group. So I can say year 1 spring. So I can say spring here, check mark, and I can do this all the way down as much as I need to. If for some reason you still have some editing sequencing, so moving some rules around, you can do the edit sequence, which does allow you to move the different courses between the different term groups. Thanks for watching. This concludes our video on updating pathways.